my great pleasure to introduce our main speaker for tonight, Jimmy D from Dallas.
Hey everybody, my name's Jimmy D and I'm alcoholic. I'm glad to be here. Beautiful Denver, Colorado. I've been enjoying it till about, a minute ago. This is not my bailiwick, but everybody gets a turn. Everybody gets a turn, and this is my turn. I know the flyer said Chicago, Illinois. You know, we're a society of people who continue to make mistakes. My home group in Dallas, Texas, is the Chicago group of Alcoholics Anonymous in Dallas, Texas. And Patrick, when he graciously asked me to come over, we had a conversation about that, but no offense to Patrick, I should speak in the first person. You know, I might be having a conversation with you, but I am certainly just thinking about how it impacts me, right? And so every third or fourth word, I'm sure we stuck on that. So we stuck on Chicago. My name's up there correct at the top, so it's a win, right? It's a win. I flew over, easy flight. Chairperson picked me up at the airport. I was at a deal last weekend down in Florida, and we were flying from Dallas. A woman from Austin, Texas was on that program. So we were on the same plane from Dallas down to Southwest Florida. And the reason this is relevant is I'm going to tell you that this was a seamless, quote unquote, hosting experience, if that's what you want to call it, right? So, you know, I'm just here for overnight. So I've been texting with Austin. We've been talking just very briefly about details, and we didn't say anything about, are you going to check a bag, not check a bag? He knew I was on American Airlines, which is really all he needed to know. And then I get out here and I'm talking about, you want me on the left-hand doors or the right-hand doors? I didn't say anything about east or west. That's way too complicated. And we just had, like, I would say, just a very superficial text conversation, almost borderline autistic textual conversation. No offense to anyone. I'm not here to offend anybody, but it was high level, certainly. And all I needed to know was the vehicle was silver. I didn't need to know about license plates or any of that other kind of stuff. And anyway, obviously I'm here, and that was a seamless deal. I walked out onto the curb. He was at the curb. Alcoholics can always spot other alcoholics. I got in the car, and here we go, right? So this Florida deal was different, right? And this guy that was hosting had been sober a while, 20 years, 25 years, a while. And I think he just took his commitment very seriously, and I want to commend him for taking that commitment very seriously. But he had worked for an airline in one of his former lives, and that's only relevant because they had some weather in northern Florida, and so we started to circle a little bit around Tampa. And the minute that we started to circle, he started texting me. And he said, oh, I bet you'll be, 2.7 minutes later than your estimated time of arrival, because this secret app that I have access to tells me that flight so-and-so is circling around Tampa, right? And so I said, yeah, okay, or whatever, and went back to whatever it was I was doing. And I'm not kidding, like by the time, 20 minutes between circling a little bit and then being led into the airport, I bet he had texted me 79 times. And then he starts telling me about what vehicle he was in, and that it was, some kind of, I think he called it wolf gray, and he said it was a 2023 model, but it looked like a 2024 model, and there was a small indentation in the left bumper, and that's because he had this traffic accident the other day that wasn't his fault. And I mean, it's just pages and pages and pages of stuff. So Laura, the woman from Austin that's on the plane with me, I'm sober August 25th, 1997. And so I'm 28 years in the deal. Laura's 37 or 38 years. So, go to the person with more time. And I said, I don't want to dislike this guy. So you tell me, is there something wrong here? And she said, absolutely, right? So after all those details, he picks us up at the airport, and we get loaded up. We drive down to Naples. It's 15, 20 minutes away. He brings us into the front lobby of this hotel. We're staying for the weekend. And he starts talking to the lady at the front desk. And Laura and I both assume he's going to make sure that our reservations are there. Because sometimes, people make mistakes. How gracious that he's trying to make sure he's going the extra mile. He got out of his car or whatever. And he's talking to this lady and he says, the conference doesn't really start until Friday afternoon. This was Thursday night. He said, the conference doesn't really start till Friday afternoon. And he said, normally I can get a parking pass from you guys a day early. Can I get my parking pass? And she said, oh yes. And so she gives him his parking pass, and he doesn't say goodbye, maybe I'll see you again, whatever. He immediately turns around and runs back to his vehicle. And I said, isn't that interesting that he was like over the top detailed until at which point he had actually gotten us into the building. And then once he got us in the building, I never saw him again. So it's interesting how we do this stuff, right? So I'm appreciative of anybody and everybody who made a commitment to support this meeting. And the way that you guys support this meeting certainly is if you're serving in some capacity with a service commitment as part of this meeting. But the way I understand these, I'm going to call them citywide meetings, or at least the way they exist in my part of the AA landscape, the reason for its existence is to build a sense of community among members from the greater Denver area that are members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I would say probably also the Al-Anon family groups. And this is an open AA meeting. Those of you who are interested in knowing a little bit more about the disease of alcoholism. And the open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous is the most important public information tool we have. I also really appreciate that you read what we would call the Texas preamble in this meeting. And it arouses the ire of a lot of members of AA because it's straight up. I mean, it just kind of tells it like it is. I've seen whole workshops form in Dallas, Texas around the statement in the old Texas preamble that says, we're not interested in sobering up drunks who are here for only temporary sobriety. And the minute that I ingest beverage alcohol, I lose all status as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And so, based on what they knew at the time, old Searcy used to claim right and title to authoring that deal when he was on a plane with Bill, arguing about the traditions or some such back in the day. But I do appreciate it because it's just straight up, right? It's straight up. Just says, here's the deal. If you want what we have, I mean, we can condense all that to if you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it. And so again, I'm thankful and grateful. I'm especially thankful for the lead that Chris, that you made for us tonight. I'm a guy who's cleverly disguised as a function member of society because of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I came to Alcoholics Anonymous at the age of 32, and I did not know I had alcoholism when I came to AA. Now, I didn't think I had other chemicals that were causing me problems. I thought that the circumstances of my existence, if they had been different, if they would be different, if they can be different, all that stuff would certainly not have happened the way that it happened. Dallas County Adult Probation was not agreeing with me. They thought I needed to get sober. And so it's through a somewhat comedic series of events, Memorial Day of 1997, a year into probation for a second DWI, I found myself in my first meeting of AA. And they had some topic, and I can't tell you what the topic, I probably couldn't tell you what the topic was a week after I sat in that meeting, but There were 60 or 70 people in that group that night. I didn't even know AA meetings lasted an hour. Now, I'd been filling out my own court sheet, but I just gave a start time. I never gave an end time. And so I did some simple math, and I thought, my gosh, every single one of these people talk, we're going to be in here all night long, right? So we do recycle beer cans for months of sobriety around my town, and so we give a little aluminum silver chip, 24-hour commitment to sobriety. I take it very seriously as a sober AA member, but at the time I saw it as a diversion because I needed to get out. There was a brand new bottle of Tanqueray gin under the front seat of my car, and my gosh, after exposure to you for an hour, I mean, I needed a drink, and it worked. When I got the chip, everybody clapped. And we closed the meeting with the Lord's Prayer, and at a minute after 7 o'clock, the room was empty. Now, I spent some years in Alcoholics Anonymous, an inordinate number of years in Alcoholics Anonymous, making statements with a tone that was, I would say, somewhat disrespectful to that group where I'd found myself on Memorial Day of 1997. And I can tell you, to the best of my ability, I've tried not to do that anymore. I believe they did anything that they knew that they could do. And what they knew to do was meet. And that's no critical analysis. It's just what they knew to do. In fact, I was so, let's just say, generally not respectful that in the middle of the pandemic, that same group called me and asked me if I would talk at their anniversary. Now, everything was in the box then, right? We'd all gone to the box. So I said, well, give me the date, send me the Zoom coordinates, and if my calendar's open, I'd be honored to do it. And they said, oh, no, we're doing it in person. We're going to meet in person. We're going to have a big barbecue. We're going to eat lunch over here and whatever. And I said, well, okay, let me just make that note, and I'll get back to you. So I hung up the phone, and I called my sponsor of 25 years now. And I said, Group X, you won't believe Group X. My God, they're going to meet in person. They're going to eat together in person. I mean, people are dropping like flies from this weird disease and blah, 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 blah. And he goes, shut up. Shut up. He said, you've spent years maligning and defaming that group. Best way for you to make amends to those people is get over there, get that COVID, drop dead, and make amends to them for it. But a guy held back, had 6 months. 6 months of sobriety. Seemed like 1,000 years at the time. We weren't people who normally would mix. We never would have mixed, ever. I was in the most expensive suit of clothes I owned because I was going to Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't let anybody think there was anything wrong with me. He was covered in drywall. He'd just gotten off work. Godsend to the new man. He had tattoos started at the top of his neck, and they ran almost to the tips of his fingernails. He had 29 earrings in the right ear and 31 in the left. He came up and greeted the new man, gave me a firm handshake, looked me square in the eyes, and said, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous, welcome to AA. We're glad you're here. He gave me a telephone number as a resource and told me if I needed anything that night that I could use it, should use it, needed to use it. And he said, if you'll be at this same meeting tomorrow night, I'll be sure to be here and meet you. He never sponsored me. My first 10 or 15 years of sobriety, get 9 or 10 months and reset, 9 or 10 months of reset. He saved my life. Wasn't my first day of continuous sobriety. My gosh, I had the long, hot summer of 1997 to walk through before that. But I'm going to tell you, the longer that I stay in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more I realize that the 6 or 7 minutes that he spent with me, he brought me into AA. To the extent that I was willing to engage with Alcoholics Anonymous, he brought me into Alcoholics Anonymous. There was no frothy emotional appeal. There was not really any begging or pleading. There was not much sharing of his story, certainly hardly any of mine. But I was given absolutely everything Alcoholics Anonymous needed to give me. I was given a commitment. I was given a telephone number. And in fact, he followed through, I'm sure, and showed up the next night, right? That DWI didn't qualify me for membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. All the public intoxes don't qualify me for membership in Alcoholics Anonymous. Drinking every day to blackout status doesn't qualify me as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Silkworth gave us the definition of an alcoholic. Perfect definition of an alcoholic. I'm a guy who gets a sense of ease and comfort just driving to the liquor store. Don't you get a sense of ease and comfort just driving to the liquor store? Because you know what's at the liquor store. I'm a guy who certainly cannot differentiate true from false. I'm a guy who feels like society in general has wronged me. I'm a person who just says if they would just leave me alone and let me do what I want to do, I would be okay, and then turn right around when I get in trouble again and say, oh no, please don't leave me alone. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. My parents had died when I was young. My father had left when I was about 4. He dropped off at somebody else's house and never came home. That didn't make me alcoholic. My mother was a formidable woman. She was from the deepest of the deep South. Metairie, Louisiana, almost in the water. Come to Dallas to go to school at SMU. Met my dad. They had resources. My family had resources. Resources don't make you alcoholic. Resources don't keep you from being alcoholic. Resources are just resources. It just is what it is. So when my dad didn't come home, she picked up and did what she needed to do for the next 11 or 12 months. Then this other man came into her life. He's going to be the evil, wicked step-parent, right? Ultimately, oh my God, he's the most gracious man I've ever known. He was a big, huge dude, but he had just this massive heart. My mother fell in love with him. I fell in love with him. We all fell in love with him. It was good. It was good. There were no breaking glasses in my house. No squealing tires in the driveway. None of that. We moved from Dallas, Texas to Lafayette, Louisiana when I was a little 8-year-old boy. That didn't make me alcoholic. My mother was so excited she couldn't stand it because she said I had only come up here to Dallas, Texas to go to school 4 years and that's it. And to my mother, she said, I am never spending my life in the North, and she believed Dallas, Texas was the North. And so we lived in Lafayette, which certainly is not Metairie. It's Cajun country. There's no question about that. And I went to that little parochial school with a bunch of strange little Cajun kids, and I just fell right in the middle of all of that, right? Thibodeaux and Arsenaults and Flows and Moes and all that other kind of stuff. And I didn't have nearly enough letters in my last name, and they knew I wasn't from there. But I didn't feel different. I just rode my bike where they rode their bikes, and I fished for whatever it was that they were fishing for in the creeks around town, and we just went ahead and did whatever it is that we wanted to do, and we had a good time. That stepdad brought a mother with him, my grandmother, and my grandmother flew to Lafayette to bring the little tow-headed kid home for the summer so they could go off and do the things that they wanted to do. And 1973, 50 odd years ago, there weren't any laws about anything back then. So my mother got on a plane with us that morning. And she told me about all the places they were going to go and the things they were going to see. And she said, honey, you won't believe how quickly we're all going to be back together in Lafayette. We'll all be here together. She kissed me on the cheek. She left. I'd probably been away from home a couple overnights for scouts or something. And the next morning, within a 24-hour period of time, the world completely changed. And there are a lot of people in this room and outside of this room where in a matter of hours, the world can completely change. And what happened is, overnight, something happened. And we had to turn right around and go back to Lafayette. And the something was that somebody or something ran my mother off the road right after she left us at the Lafayette airport. And we went 8 days to the Our Lady of Lourdes Hospital in Lafayette, Louisiana, while she hung on to whatever it was that she hung on to. I didn't know about any of that. Those people not having conversations with me did not make me alcoholic. These were good people. They didn't have anything to say. The fact that I sat in that waiting room for hours on end and thought about all of these things that they could have, should have been doing, right? Counting dots and tiles in the ceiling just to pass the time, and somebody come out of that hospital room and I'd think, if they come get me, I'll fix it. That was all formed in my own mind. I made my own conclusions about that as a little boy. Day 8 or day 9, a priest came up the hall, gave me a little prayer card, said, think good thoughts about your mother, and that's the way to let me know that she had passed away from somebody or something running her off the road. We never had the answer. That didn't make me alcoholic. She was the most God-fearing person I'd ever known. I was her only child. She had her cup filled in her building. There are lots of people who have their cup filled in their building. She felt like it was important for her to communicate to her boy as best she could the example of the fact that she surrendered to a power greater than herself when she went around and did what she did in that building. And what I learned from that was not atheism, was not agnosticism. What I learned from that was, oh my gosh, don't get too close. Don't get too close to that power, because it can destroy you. It'll destroy the lives of people around you that love you unconditionally. I thought I watched it in real time. So, of course, we closed up the house in Lafayette. My real father was living it. He didn't make himself known. I didn't know the answer to that story 50 years ago. I don't know the answer to that story today. I moved in with my grandmother, my stepdad. My dad went to a big ranch we had south of Fort Worth. He'd call on the weekends, ask me how school was going, if I'd hooked up with my old friends. I'd talk to him for a few minutes, and I'd think, he should be here with us. He's my dad. I'm living with his mother. My grandmother was the youngest of 9 children. There were 5 girls in that family. They had these genetics that were phenomenal. They all lived to be at least 90 years old. And I'd eavesdrop on her conversations, and she'd say, he just needs time. He loved her so much, and she died so tragically. We're going to leave him on that land, and he's going to be okay. From the time he was a little boy, that land has given him strength. So that's what we did. And 11 months later, our house was full of people. My grandmother couldn't talk. She was crying so hard because my stepfather committed suicide in the living room of that ranch house, her only child. That did not make me alcoholic. He was not alcoholic. I've been in many places in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I understand the assumption. But I also realize, even with some of the men that today call me sponsor, that over the periods of their drinking career, because they were alcoholic, a drink saved their lives. A drink saved their lives. It kept them from that final jumping off point, right? He could not or would not, whatever that was. I was fortunate in that I had people that were, let's just say, willing to scoop me up. Not my real dad, but that woman that wasn't blood related to me at all. That grandmother scooped me up. She said, I love this boy and I loved his mother, and obviously my son loved them both. She gave me tools for living. She told me right from wrong. She gave me a sense of community, a sense of selfless action, of service. She probably told me pretty much the same stuff that big tall guy that looks like Larry Bird told me in my first few days and weeks in Alcoholics Anonymous. But when he said it, it sounded different. Isn't that weird? Right? That church. I ran to the church. Of course you run to the church. I mean, I wasn't a church goer, but I ran to the church 2 or 3 years before I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when the heat was on really bad. And I went to one of those people that was, let's just say, ordained to speak for that institution. And I said, I got big problems. I got a job I'm about to lose. I'm not welcoming any member of my family's home. I'm on probation for X and Y and Z in Dallas County. I got big problems. And they said, listen to this, it's a joke. They said, we serve breakfast to the homeless on Saturday and Sunday morning. If you'll be down on St. Paul Boulevard in downtown Dallas at 7 o'clock in the morning, we are going to give you an opportunity that will completely change your life. And I said, I didn't come here for a job. I came here for an answer, right? I first came to Alcoholics Anonymous. My sponsor said, we're going to make you a greeter. I've been sober about 17 minutes, right? At the open speaker meeting on Saturday night, we're going to make you a greeter. But they didn't give me any greeter training. And I was quick when I came to AA. So I stood out there on the pavement just like these wonderful people did when we were afforded the opportunity to come in and take a seat in a room of AA tonight. But I stood out there and I greeted you when you came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome to the 5th tradition. Good sponsors have good spies, and my sponsor had lots of good spies. And I've never had a finger in my chest. The 2 men that have sponsored me the 28 years I've been here, Greg my first couple and a half years and Baxter the rest, never had a single finger in my chest, but I've had a lot of arms around my shoulder. Greg went out there and put an arm around my shoulder and walked me around the corner. And he looked me in the eyes and he said, Jimmy, the reason we have greeters is because we want people to feel welcome when they come. And he taught me how to greet. He taught me how to greet. I took my first drink at the age of 15. That grandmother raised me up, right? Gave me absolutely everything I wanted, I needed, all that other kind of mess, right? Don't I feel different from all these other kids that have 2 natural parents or 1 natural parent? I don't remember any of that. But I was a nerd. I mean, it was terrible. Maybe I am a nerd, right? But it was pronounced then. And most of the guys I sponsor, they make fun of me because I like Wikipedia. And I can spend, hours in Wikipedia, right? And, but anyway, so I went to a senior beer bust. We weren't invited to the senior beer bust. Me and these 2 buddies of mine, they were identical twins. Their dad was a podiatrist, so you can just begin to imagine. I mean, it was bad. And it was at White Rock Lake in Dallas, not far from where I live today. And oh my God, they tapped that first keg and they were happy. They got in that second keg. It was on. It was on. Boys were chasing girls. Girls were chasing boys. Second keg, they started falling down on each other on purpose. None of that stuff was happening in the French club or the Sands club or the Latin club. And I had 2 cups of hot foam from a tapped out keg at the hill at White Rock Lake. And it didn't change my perception, but I equated everything they were doing with what they were drinking. The senior guy found out I had resources. They wanted my resources, gave me a list of 3 things that I needed. You could be 18 back then in the dark ages was legal drinking age. So I don't know what you did in Colorado, but in Dallas, Texas, you sat in front of a woman who looked like she'd been alive since the earth cooled. You gave her $50. She made you 18. You went and took a hardship driver's license at the age of 15. You could drive legally if you proved a hardship. I went and lied about a hardship. I passed the test, and they put this sticky tape on the back of the license, to and from school only. That was the restriction. I gave it to the senior leader of the pack. I was proud that I passed the test. I said, I can't drive at night. There's no way. There's a restriction. Well, he was a worldly dude. He was 17. He knew what was going on. He just flipped the license over, ripped the sticky tape off the back of the driver's license. I was appalled, right? I said, that's issued Austin, Texas. There's a seal on that. You can't malign or defame that. And he said, dude, here's what happens. You get pulled over. It's going to happen. Cop's going to run that license and see that restriction. He said, what you've got to do is you got to look him in the eyes when he comes back to your window. He's going to say, you can't legally operate a motor vehicle in the city of Dallas, Texas this late at night. You got to make sure you look at him, and here's the script. You say, officer, I had absolutely no idea there was a restriction on my driver's license. I said, but if I did that, it would be a lie. And he said, if you tell a lie and they believe it, it's no longer a lie. The third and final thing I needed was a car to go with the license, and I got a brand new Firebird. I went home through a fit. Had 14 miles on it when I drove it off the lot. And now things are really going to get good. I went through the horseshoe at Woodrow Wilson High School the next day, and junior girl saw the car. She didn't see the driver, but she saw the car. I was in there about 2 minutes. She found me, picked me up 7 o'clock. We went to Papagayo Disco in Greenville Avenue that fall, and to say we were out of our element would be an understatement. I was 15. I looked like I was about 9. She was 17, but she couldn't pass for legal. They had trays of amaretto sour circulating around that bar that night, stacked 3 high, old-fashioned glasses. You pitch $1.50 up on a barmaid's tray and grab the drink. Now, I loved to drink. I loved to drink. You didn't have to choke any of that down. I liked how it tasted, what it looked like, the glasses that it came in. I liked it all. But I'm going to tell you, that was like cough medicine with ice cubes in it that night. And I swigged the whole thing down as quick as I could. I didn't feel anything at all. They said, get another. So now we're up to $3. I got that second drink, and in the third or the fourth swallow, it happened. Where had it been? Found something to make tomorrow seem like it's a million years away. And there's lots of times I need tomorrow to be a million years away. I found something to allow a guy like me to repaint yesterday and make yesterday look exactly the way that I always wanted it to look. There's power in a drink. That's what Silkworth talks about, right? Not average temperate drinking. Where had that been? I'm going to get so good at repainting yesterday that I'm going to make people that are in my periphery. That's good stuff, right? Oh no, You just thought you saw that. You just thought you heard that. You just thought this, that, and the other thing. Alcoholics Anonymous affords a guy like me a set of principles, 12 and 12 forward says, that are spiritual in their nature, which if I practice them as a way of life, they can expel the obsession to drink. And as we heard in the 10-minute talk, the foundation, physical sobriety, as a starting point, expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer, me, to become happily and usefully whole. That process over time, the teaching and practice of the steps. Obviously, gradually things got worse, but I had accomplishments. Most of us do, right? I eked out of college. I got a degree, SMU. Went to work at a little software company at the age of 19. By the tail end of my drinking, Memorial Day of 1997, I show up 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning, because that's where mid-level executives show up, 10:30 or 11 o'clock in the morning. You know, when I walk down the hallway after 13 years, they get up and they shut their doors because they're disgusted that there's nobody in that company that has the guts to fire me. That grandmother sacrificed all that time, effort, and energy to raise another child. I'm not welcome in her home when I come to you. She's afraid of me. When I got bonded out of jail for that second DWI, I called her lawyer without her permission. Of course I did. I told him she'd be happy to pay any bill that he happened to present. I was 3/4 drunk when I got out of that tank at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. I went to one of the nicest parts of my city, and I beat on an 80-year-old woman's door until she came downstairs. And when she opened her front door, I didn't say, "Oh my God, I think this drinking's killing me." I didn't say, "I am so sorry that I am here asking you for help at this hour of the morning." I didn't say anything like that. I said, "You fix it because you owe me." She pulls me off in a side room in that house to try to get me to sleep it off. 2 or 3 hours later, I get up. I'm sobering up. That's not good. I want my keys. She said, "Honey, I can't give you your keys. If you drive, you're going to kill yourself or somebody else." So I start tearing up her house. Of course I start tearing up her house. I pull a telephone cord out of the wall and tell her I'll strangle her with the cord if she doesn't give me my car keys. Of course I'm not welcome in her home. Of course she's afraid of me. And that sponsor doesn't wait. After I finally get sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not saying that I hip-hop around steps out of order, but they did some triage work with me early on. And the way the triage work was done was not in the formality of an AA meeting. We had a lot of pavement time. And I hope all of you get pavement time too. Pavement time and windshield time. My sponsor talked in some of the most God-forsaken towns within 150 miles of Dallas, Texas. I mean, towns whose names I couldn't even present. And I'm born and raised there. I said, "Where in the world is that?" I didn't even know where it was. And all the way down there and all the way back, we'd have to talk about that book. We would talk about that book, and we would talk about that book, and we would read the same page over and over again. What do you think that means? Right? What do you think that means? How do you think you can put that into practical application? What do you think that definition means? What do you think the phenomenon of craving means? How do you think that's manifested itself in your life? So after the Memorial Day experiment in Alcoholics Anonymous, I found that Larry Bird guy. The Larry Bird guy found me, and he put a healing on me one night at a book study on Thursday night, which is a place that was going to become my first home group in AA. And they gave me that commitment. I got drunk 6 days out of 7. The 7th day, I'd show back up at that little big book group. They'd take that commitment away because I'd lost my sobriety, and it'd take them about, 30 or 45 seconds. They'd turn on the heel and they'd give the commitment back. Because I'd found myself in a home group, not a meeting house. I'd found myself around people who were in Alcoholics Anonymous rather than going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And those are two fundamentally different things. It's a fundamentally different thing to go to AA as opposed to being in AA. And I'm not saying they were any better than any other AA members. They just took Alcoholics Anonymous very seriously. They felt like it was a foundational component of all those things that they gave high priority to. Old David A. would use these cunning phrases like kitchen AA, and you'd sit around with him when I was new in sobriety and I'd say, "What in the world does kitchen AA mean?" And he'd say, "AA at home, where it really makes a difference. kitchen AA is AA at home. And David was sober long enough and cunning and baffling long enough that he didn't really care about the call-in that his pigeon made. He'd call the wife or significant other of the pigeon, and he'd say, how's Jimmy's kitchen AA, right? How's the program really working at home, right? And she'd say, he screams and hollers because he says, I sit around all day and I don't do anything. And he comes home and the dishes are, dirty in the sink, right? And so the next time David saw his pigeon at the meeting or whatever, he'd just walk up to him and he'd say, wash the dishes. If the dishes bother you, wash the dishes. And the guy just kind of had this weird and puzzled look on his face. There are a lot of members of Alcoholics Anonymous that say, how in the world would he presume to get into that other guy's business like that? He was invited into that business. Absolutely he was. Because all that turmoil at home, take that guy out. In a heartbeat, it'll take that guy out. Worldly clamors will remove a guy like me from Alcoholics Anonymous. And on the night of the 24th of August, 1997, at the bottom of a half gallon of Skol vodka, I know. Where's that guy that used to talk? He may be in the big meeting now, but he'd say, it's bad vodka when there aren't more than 3 or 4 vowels in it. I can't remember what that guy's name was. But anyway, I was driven my knees by a disease called alcoholism. And so all those people that had been saying God, as they understood God, was doing for them what they couldn't do for themselves, I believed that they believed that night. I'm not saying that I even thought that it was a palatable idea. But I believed that they believed that it was working for them one day at a time. And the next morning I got up and I began to buy the package. And the package for me was a daily call-in, 7:30 in the morning. I called my sponsor every morning at 7:30. And I'd tell him about how horrible I thought everything was. And that physical sobriety made it 100 times more horrible. And he would say, what time are you getting to work over there? I mean, just like a completely unrelated question. And I go, well, I've done better. I'm in there by 10. He said, what time does everybody else get over there? I said, they're a sick bunch of people. They're there by 8:30, 8:45 in the morning. He said, I want you to go over there at 8 o'clock in the morning. I want you to go at 8 o'clock in the morning. Between now and in the morning, I want you to think of something you can do for those people, and you cannot let them know that you did it. And I thought, what would that be? Because I hate all those people, right? What would that be? So we had a fax machine. And if you're under the age of 30, Wikipedia, right? But it was technology. In 1997, it was technology. In fact, I'd venture to say it was high technology. And it had been on the fritz for about 2 weeks, and it was incapacitating our office, and it was driving secretaries and stuff insane. So I just opened, there are only about 4 working parts in the thing. I opened it up and it needed a little bulb. There was a bulb that was fried. You could tell that the bulb in the fax machine was fried. So I went over to a little Ace Hardware store, and I got the little bulb for the fax machine. I came back and popped it in about 8:15 in the morning. My office was in the corner outside of that big open area. About 8:35 in the morning, I mean, it starts spitting out thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of faxes, right? I mean, they're scattered all over the floor. The holder can't even begin to contain them. And I mean, I'm going to tell you, they thought it was like the second coming. I mean, they are just screaming and hollering. They are beyond excited. And I'm there in my office, and I'm rocking back and forth, holding on to the seat of my chair, thinking, I have to tell them, because this, in and of itself, this takes care of everything. Just like the guy that says, I'm sober now, everything's fine, just forget about all those heinous actions that I took. Everything's good. And I'm rocking back and forth. We were on the 14th floor of that office building. I didn't have a cell phone back then. I finally had to go down in the lobby and use a payphone and call Greg, my sponsor, and I said, I have to tell them. And he said, if you say one word about fixing that fax machine, he said, I will come over there and I am not responsible for what I'm going to do to you. And I said, I thought people were kind in AA. You know what I mean? So little things that were really huge things. I talked to him about the absence of any relationship with any member of my family, right? Relationships that I drank away, that I told myself if I got drunk enough, that there were so many things on their side that were their fault, that caused all those huge problems. And alcohol, not imbibing beverage alcohol, impacts my ability to alter my perception that way. So it hurts me, right? It hurts me. And so on Saturday night after a speaker meeting at the Big Book Group, I'm sober about, let's just say 35 days. I'm on step 1.5, barely. And he turns around and he says, tomorrow's Sunday. I want you to call your grandmother tomorrow, and here's the script you're going to follow. You're going to ask her how she's doing. You're going to tell her you're doing fine. And he said, I want you to continue to call her every Sunday until she tells you you can't call her. Do not call me anymore. And I got in the car, 35 days of sobriety, and I thought, I'm out of AA. I'm out. I got no tools for that. I don't own any of that. I'm not owning any of that. I'm not going to do it. But I made a grave mistake. For those 35 days, every single day, I had been doing a couple of very simple things that he'd suggested that I do. I hit my knees in the morning and asked a God I did not know nor understand for a day of sobriety. Just that, nothing more. If I stayed sober all day long and through a gift of, I believe, of God's grace, I had been indulged and I was staying sober one day at a time. Before I got in bed at night, it's vitally important, hit my knees, thank God for that day of sobriety. So I hit my knees that Sunday morning, and when I got up, I couldn't think about anything but the phone. And I made the call. And the conversation was short and terse, and it was completely without emotion. I asked her how she was doing and told her I was doing fine. 20 seconds later, she hung up the phone. I went back to Greg for the next 6 days and told him all the reasons why I could not continue to make those telephone calls. And he said, did she tell you not to call? And I said, no. And he said, we have a deal. We have a deal. This is our plan. 9 months sober, maybe 10. Maybe I'm on step 2.25. 11 o'clock on a Sunday morning, she picks up the telephone and she said, I've been thinking about you today. I made this batch of tuna salad. When you were a little boy, you loved my tuna salad. If you could be at my house in 30 minutes, I'll make you a tuna salad sandwich. I hung up the telephone and I ran red lights in my town to get down to her house. I ate that tuna fish sandwich like it was ambrosia. But I said, yes, ma'am, when she asked me a question, and my back was as straight as it ever been. True to form, at 11:30, she kicked me to the curb. I didn't have a cell phone then. I rushed back home so I could call my sponsor and give the report. Greg answered the telephone. The minute he picked up, I said, oh my God, she's changed. He said, oh no, Jimmy, she hadn't changed. And she doesn't need to. You're just beginning to exhibit natural byproduct of beginning to apply the principles that are embodied in the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Complete transformation in attitudes, ideas, and actions for you. He believed that there were 4 character assets that would be part and parcel of the work, if we want to call it the work, that's done in applying those spiritual principles into our everyday existence, our interaction with other human beings on the planet, surrendering to something or somebody perhaps of power. Maybe just surrendering to the absolute belief that there is no power, because believing in nothing is believing in something. Whatever that looks like, right? Reconciling with that, surrendering to it, forming a process. And those 4 character assets are availability, accountability, responsibility, and respectability. I saw it when I came in here tonight. Maybe not to a man or woman or person, but I saw it when I came in here tonight. Do you hear the energy and enthusiasm in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous? Most of us don't have to be here very long to hear a little bit about Jack Alexander. Jack Alexander coming and blowing the lid off AA. There's a pamphlet. It's Jack's article for the Saturday Evening Post. What was Saturday Evening Post? It was the X of its day. What I didn't know for the first 5 or 6 years of my sobriety, I believe Jack knew somebody who knew somebody, because almost everybody in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, they were somehow connected. Either they were somebody's ex-wife or ex-husband, or they had a cousin or a nephew, or there was a Rockefeller in there somewhere. All those people were somehow incestuously mixed up with one another. Jack was an investigative reporter. And Jack came to the 24th Street Clubhouse to blow the lid off AA as the Ponzi scheme that everybody knew that it was. Because you know what we were telling people? We said that when one alcoholic shares experience, strength, and hope with another alcoholic, both alcoholics get better. And the biggest lie we were telling is we didn't charge anything for that. It was free. If you wanted what we had, you could come and avail yourself of that for free. So rather than have any advance information, in other words, a bulletin distributed through the Denver Intergroup, none of that stuff happened. Jack just showed up, like he might show up tonight. And he hung out over there at that coffee bar for a few minutes before this meeting started, and he said, "Why are you here? How long have you been here? Are you staying? Are you going?" And then he came in, and unfortunately, he listened to somebody talk like me. And then after that meeting was over, once again, he engaged with these members of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he asked just a little bit about their story, about exactly how they found this thing called AA and what they thought about it. And then he went home, and he wrote the article that literally exposed Alcoholics Anonymous to the world. One, perhaps the greatest single gift by a non-alcoholic to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous that's ever been done. So the Chicago group of Alcoholics Anonymous, I invite all of you to come. If you're ever in, it's in person only on a Wednesday night in Dallas, Texas at 7 o'clock. Please come. It's 90 minutes long. I think it's the greatest speaker meeting in the state of Texas. Don't eat dinner. 50 or 60 of us go to dinner after the meeting, probably 150, 175 in the actual meeting. And about every 2 or 3 months, because I've been around almost 24 years since we started that deal, on my own, because of that story that I learned from an old timer about Jack, before the meeting starts, just like tonight, I get over in a corner of the room, all those early commitments. People come to set the room up, make coffee, put the butt cans out, do those jobs that are part and parcel of making the AA event happen. And I listen to the conversations, the AA buzz that's going on in the room before the meeting starts. And then about 15 or 20 minutes into the lead, the guest speaker, the member of AA's come across town in order to share experience, strength, and hope. I close my eyes and I just listen. For me only, just for me. Is there a clear AA message coming through there? Do I hear recovery coming through off of that lectern? And then after that meeting is over, after we thank that speaker, when we're talking about dinner, wherever we're going, here, there, and other places, I listen one more time. I listen to the meeting after the meeting in a room of Alcoholics Anonymous. And my barometer for success, just for me, is if Jack Alexander had been in that same room that same night and he'd had those conversations before that meeting, if he had listened to that speaker during that meeting, if he had done what I did after that meeting was over, and he was going home to write an article about Alcoholics Anonymous, what kind of article would he write? What would it look like? What statements would be made? And oftentimes I fail. I've been sober about 25 years, so a while, and I'm one of the guys that helped Dallas Intergroup start answering our phones, live human AA members after 5 o'clock at night when the office closed. And so I've always tried to shepherd that deal, rotation or no rotation. I've always had spindly fingers in it one way or the other. And I've always tried to take a shift every now and then. So a guy that I sponsor is kind of the captain of that ship right now. And I took this shift. And about 8:30 or 8:45, let's just say it was on a Thursday night, I got a call from a guy who was about 3/4 drunk. You know, he wasn't all the way drunk, but he was getting there. He was close to drunk. And he said, I want to talk to you about how AA doesn't work. And so I'm 25 years sober. I'm fairly grounded in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a sponsor. I'm sponsoring a bunch of people. And so I know the script. If you want something from Alcoholics Anonymous, please let me know. We'll do everything we can to help. But I need to keep this line open for those that call that need AA's help. I know the script. I helped write the script. Instead, I just jumped right down there in the middle of that conversation with that guy to debate the merits of Alcoholics Anonymous with a guy who's drunk, right? And I'd say about 20 or 25 minutes later, I am screaming at him at the top of my lungs. He's screaming back at me at the top of his lungs. We're screaming at each other, calling each other everything under the sun. And I hung up on him. And from 9 o'clock at night till 8:30 the next morning, every 15 minutes, he called me. And so at 9 o'clock the next morning, the 25-year sober AA member calls my sponsor. I call my sponsor and I say, you won't believe what happened when I took that intergroup shift last night. And I start going on and on about all that. And he said, again, normal response for me, shut up. You mean to tell me you had an extended dialogue with a drinking drunk to prove to him that Alcoholics Anonymous works? And I said, well, if you say it like that, maybe. He said, listen, if you don't ever let that happen again. So I take the suggestion or direction. Remember, I sponsor the guy who's really the captain of that ship. So I called Jeff, my guy, and I say, I want every open shift of intergroup phones you got. Because I'm going to talk to that guy again. And it took a lot of my free time and about 35 days of waiting, but he called again. About 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. And he said, I want to talk to somebody about AA not working. And I said, have you got a book? He said, I got lots of books. I said, have you got the book Alcoholics Anonymous? He goes, I got lots of books Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, read page 104 and call me back in an hour. Exactly 1 hour later, he's on my display. I answer the phone and he goes, hey man, I want to talk to you about what's on page 104. I said, I wish you would, because I have no idea what's on page 104. And he laughed. And what he realized is he took a suggestion from somebody that didn't even know, much less could form any kind of relationship with, positive or negative. He followed through. He took the suggestion and he followed through. And then he called back so he could talk a little bit more about what that suggestion might entail. And recovery can happen there. Recovery can happen there. But until a guy like me is willing to do some things that don't seem to have any relationship, either tangentially or intangentially, to sobriety or recovery in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, until I'm willing and able to surrender self enough in order to do something different based on the experience of someone else, it's almost impossible for recovery to form. It's almost impossible for recovery to grow. And it's certainly almost impossible for recovery to sustain. So at 28 years of continuous sobriety in Denver, Colorado tonight, I can tell you I'm more flawed tonight as a human than I was the day that I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous. But I have so many more resources and tools that are available to me. And the last thing I'll say is, how long has it been since you've been in any gathering of Alcoholics Anonymous where anybody has suggested that the discussion might revolve around vision for the future of AA? What will Alcoholics Anonymous look like 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now? What do we want the newcomer who's not yet born to find when they come to Alcoholics Anonymous after we're gone. In my experience, and I've been in all three legacies almost all my sobriety, floated down, and I was a bottom feeder in the service structure of Alcoholics Anonymous, charged with vision, and we really had little or no discussion around it. We talked a lot about the critical analysis of the current demographics of Alcoholics Anonymous. We did very little, if any, conversation around exactly what we might do in order to leave Alcoholics Anonymous better than it was when we found it. And it seems more often than not that the idea is that Alcoholics Anonymous somehow, because it is certainly a spiritual entity, that it is somehow a self-perpetuating organism. But it is only an organism that's strong enough as the sum of all of its parts, all of them. And we all know that some are in, some aren't in. Some certainly would avail themselves of the opportunity to be in if they knew what in was. And a lot of times that doesn't necessarily happen. So I'm of the mindset, at least within my little herd of guys, to try to begin to have conversations around the fact that what we should be trying to do is engender some spirit of community in Alcoholics Anonymous, or the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous in which we engage. So we know that we're members of Alcoholics Anonymous first. We certainly hang our home group hats at certain places because that's where we're going to get the work done. But that we do, to the best of our ability, we try to interact and engage with one another rather than all of these really distinct. I think we've taken the autonomy tradition to a level at which we've made ourselves so distinct as entities that we don't really think too much about community, AA community, and what AA community looks like and what it feels like. So it's especially a privilege tonight to see AA community alive and well and working in Denver, Colorado. And thanks for listening.